He was one of football's most colourful figures of the 1990s. He wore his hair as a mullet, a rat's tail and occasionally as a plait. He drove a hotted-up ute and his house pet was a python. He also had a streak of aggression that unnerved the opposition. Sadly, his playing days were done at 25. His life since has been even more adventurous and eventful. Daniel Southern, you've packed a bit into those years.
I have, Mike. I've been really blessed. I've had a great life and hopefully plenty more to come.
25 and finished in football through injury. How difficult was that at the time? I mean, you're a young man in a good team and playing good football.
Yeah, it was really difficult, Mike, and I actually went through a couple of years of depression. You know, I grew up as a footy lover and always had that aspiration and dream of playing in the AFL and was lucky enough to live my dream and didn't really set myself up for life after football, thinking I'd probably get to 30 if I had a great career. And yeah, hit 25 and it was all over. So, you know, I did go into a bit of a lull for a while and it took me a good 2 or 3 years for me to dig myself out of that sort of position. And I was lucky enough to, you know, move forward and have many great adventures since. So life's been great, Mike.
Well, the Bulldogs doctor of about the past 50 years, Jake Landsberger,
what a
said
great
that...
man.
Yeah, I know you're close with him. He said that your career was doomed from the time you had a knee operation at about 16.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. I had a pretty promising junior career, and at the age of 15, I unfortunately hurt my knee. Did just a lateral meniscus, so a cartilage tear initially, and went and had surgery. And at that stage, West Coast Eagles had shown a little bit of interest in myself, and did 18 months of rehabilitation down at West Coast Eagles. And during that process, had travelled over to Ireland as part of the Australian junior team. And the knee was not too good, Mike. I had a second operation after a foreign body had been left in my knee after the initial one, and it was pretty much a degenerative bone-to-bone condition from that point on. So it was a ticking bomb. I was only going to get so much miles out of it, and in the end it got me at 25.
Jake said that your courage was incredible. He said there was no way that they could actually deaden the knee joint when you were playing, and it was so bad that he told me you were living in a place in Footscray that had 2 levels, and on match night you had to sleep downstairs on the couch because you couldn't negotiate the stairs. Yeah,
that's true, Mike. Yeah, the pain... It's a mental thing, you know, you can sort of dull that pain for so long, but in the end it sort of really broke me down. You know, that start of the year 2000 was my last year as a player. I played in the first 8 games of the year, and the pain got to level where you're dead right, I couldn't get up the stairs to get upstairs, so I'd sleep downstairs, couldn't train during the week. I'd need to have, you know, some help match day, you know, I'd get some local anaesthetic to try and get me through the game, but I guess the thing that hurt the most was every time I'd fall, I'd chip bits of bone off and it would get stuck. And I remember there was one game, it was prior to a game at Optus, so I can't remember who we were playing, but we were just doing the warm-up and I chipped a nice big bit of bone off in the knee, and the knee actually got stuck. And, you know, I got the surgeons and the doctors trying to manipulate my knee to loosen up so I could go out to play. So it was a mental battle, and, yeah, it was tough. It was really sore.
Where did Rhonda the python sleep? Downstairs or upstairs?
No, Rhonda was downstairs. Yeah, she was... I love Rhonda. Yeah, she was, you know, my pet at the time, and it was quite sad that Rhonda passed away prematurely. You know, she passed away at about the age of 3, which is quite young for a snake, but she was a nice specimen. And
do you have a house full of snakes or just the one?
No, just the one, Mike, yeah. I think Troy Simmons, he was more of a snake man when I was playing at the same sort of time, but I think he had venomous snakes, so he was a little bit more serious than I.
Talking about names, you've always been particular about your Christian name, Daniel. Over here in Melbourne, I'm talking about, supporters and teammates knew you as either Ox or Danny, and you always corrected them and said, my name's Daniel. Why so?
Yeah, well, if you stem back to my childhood, when I was at school, there was actually a kid called Danny, Mike, who I didn't quite like, so I actually hated the name, and I never got called Danny in my life. Like, it was always Daniel, Dan, and when I came to Melbourne, it was just sort of got branded Danny Southern, so I sort of used to say that was my stage name. And the nickname The Ox was quite sort of, I guess it was quite personal and in close. The late great Ted Whitten actually branded me The Ox on my initial Guernsey presentation day, so it was... you know, something quite significant, yeah.
Your teammates call you that?
Yeah, they do, Mike, and I like getting called the Ox because it's only my teammates who actually refer to me by that nickname.
John was one. When I spoke to Brad Johnson, who started the same year you started, I mentioned to him I was interviewing you, and he said the first thing he said was the Ox.
Yeah, I love it, you know, I do. And because it was I was fortunate enough that my first year here, I was actually the pre-season lead into the 1994 season, and Teddy had lost his licence for a month for a minor misdemeanour. So
Yeah.
Kim Costa and I were fortunate enough to be Teddy's chauffeur. So we spent a month driving around taking Teddy to his appointments and just built a really strong relationship with the great man. And I guess that's why when he handed out my first jump, he branded me with the ox. I'm not sure why, maybe because I was so slow, I guess, Mike.
No, I think it might have been the way you attacked the footy, I think.
Possibly.
Yeah, I reckon your reputation as a footballer is undervalued because of all the things surrounding you. I mean, the snakes, your hairstyle, the stud in the ear and all that sort of stuff, that people have forgotten what a capable player you were.
Yeah, it doesn't get brought into conversation very often, Mike. As you said, there's always the other surrounding factors that I get remembered for, which is quite disappointing. So I obviously didn't make too much of an impact on the playing field. But when I look back at my playing days, I was just a battler. I was a backman.
No, you were better than that.
Oh, I did okay. I'm proud of what I achieved on the footy field. But I guess my greatest achievement out of it all was playing on some of the greatest games that names who ever played the game. Ablets and James Hurds and these sort of guys, Dunstall. I was able to play on these guys and hold my own more often than not. I only played 103 games, but I think I won probably more battles than I lost. So, considering the opposition, I'm pretty proud of what I achieved.
You say you're proud of what you achieved on the football field, and you're entitled to be. But I want to remind you of a couple of incidents on the football field.
Yeah, I thought that'd come up, Mike. I was expecting it. I thought it might have come a little bit earlier, so at least you give me a nice little intro to break me in.
Well, let's do them in chronological order. Peter Sumich was the first one, the West Coast full forward. Now, I interviewed him last year, and he's quite angry, I think, about the fact that he nearly died, and he's entitled to be. But I think the part that sort of puzzled him most was the fact that he's never had an apology from you over the wrestling incident at Subiaco in 1994.
Yeah, that's fair that he could be angry about the situation. It was, looking back at it, Mike, it was in my first year of footy. I was 19 at that stage, being a young West Australian who trained with the Eagles for 18 months prior to getting drafted. It was a big day for me going back to Subiaco Oval, and footy was pretty tough and rough back then, Mike. And it was. I remember the incident quite clear.
Well, there's the scene there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And I had, to be honest with you, Mike, I've struggled with that incident since it happened. It was 24 years ago now, and almost daily, if not every week, not exaggerating, it gets brought up in conversation, and I quite often try and brush it over and have a bit of a laugh about it. And but it really, it affected me enormously. To be honest with you, after that it was actually a week that the actual whole thing sort of dragged out for, forgetting about the actual match day. But I'd never approached football with the same vigour that I did prior to that game, and I lost so much confidence in myself and didn't really know how to deal with the media and public profile. And Ivan Milat was actually killing people in the Belangolo Forest at that time, and I was on the front page of the Herald Sun for a week. And I was never the same after that incident, Mike. And the fact you mentioned that I hadn't apologised to Peter, I'm deeply regretful and remorseful for what had happened, but I suppose I was too immature at the time. I was dealing with these other issues personally that I didn't have the maturity, I guess, to reach out to Peter to apologise. And I never meant to hurt him. There was some tough blokes playing back then.
Yeah.
And, if you're in a melee, you do what you have to do for your team. And it was just one of them unfortunate situations where, I actually did think I killed him. I actually did.
Yeah.
It was serious, and I still deal with it today.
So when you let him go, finally, because it was a sort of, in terms of denying someone their air passages, it was a long time. When you let him go, what did you think had happened to him?
I thought he was dead.
You did?
I did thought he was dead, because I remember the incident. There was a lot of bodies around at that stage from what I remember. I've never actually seen the whole incident ever since. I've seen a little grab of it, but I've never seen, the whole episode play out. So I remember having him in a headlock, and I remember him going limp. His fight, he lost his fight, and I'd let go and I stood up, and I looked down and he was motionless and his eyes had rolled back in his head, and I dead set thought he was dead. And we went in at half time and we played the game, and I copped plenty of booze that day. Don't worry about that. I remember how clear that was, just the noise at Subi Oval that day. And anyway, we jumped on a plane and we landed back in Melbourne, not knowing what had happened to Peter. And then there was a swarm of media at Tullamarine Airport when we arrived. And I thought, hang on, I don't know what's happened, but it looks like it's no good. And then sort of the week that sort of took place after that was, as I said before, was pretty traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And still having issues with it today.
Yeah, but you're saying that it's extended to the family?
Yeah.
your wife and your older boy?
Yeah, definitely. It's so I still get judged on that incident, and
Yeah.
as I said before, it gets brought up, you know, if not daily, you know, definitely every week. And my wife, who was, you know, born overseas and came to Australia just a few years ago when we got married, and oblivious to sort of my footballing background,
Yep.
you know, she sort of feels it more than what I do. Where, you know, a lot of times that we feel it, that my son's character is judged on my reputation.
Yeah, it's totally
you know,
unfair.
rather just a clean slate and, you know, judge a young fella for who he is and what he does, rather than his old man, who was Danny Southern, who was a bit of a thug on the footy field, which is a lot of what, you know, the word on the street is.
Do you resent that? Do you resent that image that it was D Southern thug? You called yourself Danny then?
I did, because the stage name. And so I went to little hyphens there, Mike. You know, I never called myself Danny. I never referred to myself as Danny. But it's twofold, Mike, because, you know, although I struggled with it and still have issues with it, that reputation did actually help me on the footy field to a degree after that. Although I never, as I said, I never attacked the contest with the same vigour before. Mentally and psychologically, it gave me a little bit of a reputation where if I was going into battle, I knew that most of the times I have the guy done before I actually stepped on the field mentally, because you thought maybe, I don't know what's going to happen, it's unpredictable.
Because
I'm
I'm playing on Daniel Southern.
Yeah, exactly. So it worked in my favour to a degree.
You mentioned to me that you'd seen the show, just to refresh yourself about what the Peter Sumich's stance was. And you said before you hadn't apologised, and I think you're regretful of that. Would you seek him out to apologise, or is it's just gone now and it's in the past?
It's probably in the past. If I did I actually did see Peter once. We came back to live in Australia about 5 years ago, and he was at a concert where I seen him, and I actually fled. You know, it was fight or flight, and I actually took off. I wasn't ready at that stage to go and confront him. Not expecting any backlash or anything like that. You know, he's a very mature man. We're growing up now. It was a long time ago, but, you know, I would like to see him, to be honest with you. I'd like to put it to bed and apologise. I didn't mean to hurt him. I can do that. Yeah, I haven't stepped out and gone down that path, Mike, and as I said, I was probably a little bit immature at that stage, and yeah, it's just something that I have never done. Yeah, no reasons or
Your wife is Egyptian, an Egyptian Muslim. Has she seen the vision of the wrestling incident? The headlock?
Yeah, we had a look at your show with Peter last week, just to do a little bit of research, of course, Mike. And so she's seen it. Yeah.
What did she think?
She was disappointed with what happened, but she knows me as a person, and I'm a lover, not a fighter, Mike. I don't want to go and hurt anybody. I played footy for 20 years and never hit anybody once in a footy field. I played hard and fair, and as I said, I never intentionally meant to hurt Peter. It was just one of those unfortunate things that happened on the day. So, you know, she's sort of a bit horrified by it, you know, because it was pretty serious.
Yeah. All right, let's leave that one, but
there's
staying
more.
in the same
There's
zone.
more,
The other one, the famous one, was Michael Gardner playing, I think, his 7th or 8th game at the Whitten Oval.
Yes.
And the Gang of Four.
Yeah, the Mongie brothers, I used to call it. It was
a
Pride of Lions. I know, it was a Pride of Lions. I love wildlife. There was a Pride of Lions called the Mongie brothers. We were like the Mongie brothers.
Southern, Crediuk, Dent and Ellis. And I think all 4 of you went for the young Michael Gardner. And, you know, buffeting him, harassing him. Michael Gardner wasn't a scared footballer, but the look on his face that day was, where the hell am I here? It's like he was being attacked on the street. Yeah,
there was definitely fear in Michael's eyes that day. We were a pretty ruthless footy team back in the late 90s, the Bulldogs. We were pretty feared, and we had a lot of guys who would push the boundaries and would do whatever it took to win. And we, as a club, as a team, and under Plough as our coach at the time, we'd identify players most weeks from the opposition who could potentially cause us damage. And that particular game, Michael Gardner, as a young upcomer, was identified as someone that could sort of, you know, take hold of the game and make it difficult for us. So we had this player who was in the gun anyway.
That's right.
And that
was there a player every week that was in the gun?
In the gun. Yeah. So that just meant that we'd go and just give them a hard time, step on their toes, give them a pinch, give them a little bit of a bump, bit of a niggle. And Michael was the one that day. And we thought, I had a lot to do with it, Mike, I've got to be frank. We as a back line decide that, you know, he's most likely going to line up forward, so we thought we'd just give him a little welcome to the kennel. It was our last game at the Western Whitten Oval, so we thought we'd welcome to the doghouse.
Now, Plough, as in Terry Wallace, said to me, hand on heart, that he did not direct you blokes to go for Gardner.
No, he didn't. No, Gardner was in the gun. Yeah, that was identified, but no, that was driven by us, the backmen, who thought we'd give him that sort of little welcome before the game. And it wasn't too much, you know, it was intimidating. There was a few of us who were sort of seasoned campaigners, let's say, who sort of confronted Michael and just gave him a little bit of a push and a shove, and then it sort of exploded and ended up being a bit of an all-in brawl, and a few punches ended up getting thrown, and I think there was a blood rule before the first bounce, which was quite unusual, and we actually got cited and went to the tribunal for that incident, and we got fined $7,500 each. So it was Craig Ellis, Steve Creddick and myself were the ones who got found guilty. I think Matthew Dent might have gone for striking, possibly, and Jason Ball might have gone up as well. So so we got fined $7,500 for Rule 10C, I think it was.
Did you blokes, you as the collective at the Bulldogs, did you cross the line? Did you play outside the rules?
On that particular occasion, or in general?
In 1997.
We played within the rules because, if we played without them, we would have got suspended and get cited. We pushed it to the very limit. And there might have been incidents on the footy field. Everyone pushes the limits, Mike. So there might have been, certain incidents throughout the season where guys might have snuck one in and got away with it. Steve Collinott was pretty good at little sneaky ones. Jose Romero was pretty cheeky. Libba was, Libba was just a soldier, I loved
Paul Dimartina?
Dimmer used to run more than he used to fight. But he was in it, don't worry about that. He'd cause plenty of dramas and tiptoe out the back. But, we pushed it, Mike, we did.
Daniel, if you were an opposition forward, name me in order who you would least like to play on out of Southern, Creddick, Dent and Ellis.
Who you'd least?
Who you'd least like...
Oh, probably Ellis.
Really?
I guess. Yeah, only because he looked so handsome. So you'd probably, he was like the devil in disguise. Don't judge a book by its cover.
But what about Critter? Remember when Matty Lloyd had the...
You wouldn't want to play on Steve Creddick.
Was there anyone in any of the opposition forwards that unnerved you? You didn't play on Plugger, did you? Matthew Croft tended to get him.
Yeah, you're right. Crofty used to play on the bigger boys. I was a little bit small for a key position player, and these days I'd be a forward pocket, to be honest with you. But, yeah, Crofty was a little bit bigger, so he used to man up on the big bulls, so like Carey and Lockett. I played on Barry Hall. He was a pretty big boy. Playing against Tony Lockett, Plugger was my idol when I was a young man growing up.
I can believe that.
I loved it. I love watching Plugger and playing against him. I manned up on him for a little bit here and there, but playing in front of him was more intimidating, I think, than playing on him. I'd like to not shirk an issue, and if the ball was there and you had to go back, I'd like to think that I would go most times.
Did you always go?
I think I always went. There might be some vision where I might have ducked out, but I don't...
I want to show you something.
You've got one? I don't think... I'd be disappointed, Mike, if I did pull out, because I'd sort of... I prided myself on my courage on the footy field, and, not often do you get hurt in the contest. I did get crunched a couple of times, but as I said before, filling that hole with Plugger coming out, you knew that if you were there for sitting, he was going to pick you off.
1997, Daniel, after the West Coast game and the Gardner incident, the next week you were reported for... No, you weren't reported, were you?
No, I was cited.
You were
later cited. Yeah.
By Ian Collins?
Yes.
Of the AFL?
Yes.
For what seemed to be an innocuous wrestling incident.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
I'm really disappointed still of what took place there.
You got a week?
I got a week for wrestling, and the incident... It was Scott West. I remember it clearly, that Scott West and it was Shane Crawford and Richard Taylor. And there was three of them just having it, little featherweights. So I've gone in, I've grabbed Richard Taylor and I've grabbed Crawford like this. I've rolled them to the ground. I laid on top of them, holding them for about 5-10 seconds from what I remember, and got cited and got a week for wrestling. And I think to this day, I might be wrong, I believe I was the first and maybe the only person ever suspended for wrestling. And that was the last game of the home and away season. So I missed the first final, went and did the tan and had some, what they call these days, some hamstring awareness, I guess you'd call it, and ended up missing the whole final series. And it was an opportunity there, for our club, it was our greatest opportunity to have a stab at the big one.
Terry Wallace said that had you not been suspended for that last round incident, he said there's no doubt that he believed the club would have played in the grand final.
I believe that too. Darren Jarman in that prelim, that 97 prelim, I remember watching it, and we were 28 points up with 10 minutes to go. And then Jarman went berserk, and I'd like to believe that if I was out there, that wouldn't have happened. And I think that
Why?
I just wouldn't have let it happen, I reckon. Michael would have made sure if he was going to go near it, he was going to earn it. He was a magical player, he was a brilliant footballer. And I'm not saying I would have been able to stop him because, we had a great team and, some magnificent defenders at the time. But, I would have liked to thought that if it was on the line, it was a grand final up for stakes, that I wouldn't have let him kick 5, that's for sure.
Do you think Do you think that the AFL said we're going to make this mob pay for the way they play their football?
I believe that's the case, and I think I was a scapegoat, and I still think, you know, it probably wasn't the right image that the AFL was looking for at that time. You know, there was the Sumich one, there was the Gardner one. You know, I think I was there for the taking, and they picked me off, and I was bitterly disappointed. I was angry as when I left that tribunal that night. And I might have said some stuff that I shouldn't have when I was leaving. Yeah, because I was ropeable. I was dead set angry, and that's history. You know, it was meant to be.
It's history, but have you moved on? Have you been able to put the footy stuff behind you?
No, I haven't. No, not a day goes past where I don't wish that I could have my time again. You know, I sort of feel like I really underachieved as a player. And you're measured in football by the ultimate success. You're either a Brownlow medalist, individual accolades, which weren't important for me, or that team success, you know. When you see Dermot Brown, a 5-time premiership player, I'm so envious and so jealous of these guys. And good luck to them, you know. I'm rapt that people will get an opportunity to play in a premiership, but I'm bitterly, I guess, jealous.
Yeah,
of
that's understandable.
Of that.
Is that part of the reason why you would leave Australia almost after the last siren of your footy season and go overseas?
Yeah, I ran away.
You did,
I did. Yeah, because I felt like there was unfinished business. As I said, I went through a lull of depression there. I didn't.
Was that clinical depression? I mean,
no, I didn't. I wasn't identified back, and there wasn't the support networks that there are these days. And I think most players who retire, elite sportsmen, I would say, who go through a bit of a lull. And it's not that yesterday's hero, that you're the famous guy and you're the celebrity walking around town. It's more that the battle and the competition and that striving for excellence or the best you could be. I guess that's the one. And just missing going out week in, week out with the boys and having a game of footy.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't really like the public profile as well. You know, I was still
because
tarnished.
of the incidents or just generally?
Yeah, just generally as a whole. After that Sumich one, I became very reclusive. I barely left the house besides going to the footy club. You know, in my downtime, I was sitting at home. I was behind closed doors. I didn't want to confront the public. You know, I had a reasonable profile back then for a guy that was, you know, not a superstar. And so just that daily challenge of going out and facing the public is quite challenging. It's hard work being a public profile. And you know, Mike, you have a high profile and it lives with you every outing, every moment.
For different reasons, yeah. That's presuming I do have one.
Yeah. Oh, maybe a bit tarnished these days, mate, but still present. Oh, mine, definitely.
I went in and there's a bit of a group, you know, on top of Brett, and then I just come in just to pull one or two of the Footscray players off. And as I did that, leaning over, someone grabbed me from behind and got me in a good headlock, and then pulled me back, and I just went to the ground with him. And then what happened, I just try to get out of that.
You're just trying to shrug him off?
Trying to work it for, 5 or 10 seconds, and I thought, oh, geez, he's got me pretty good here. I'm pretty well done. So,
what do you mean by pretty well done?
Well, I couldn't get out of it.
Yeah.
He had me in a headlock that was A grade. He must have been a good wrestler. So I just gave the tap out. I just tapped out and says, all right, that's enough.
So
you got me.
Where'd you tap him?
Just on the shoulder and arm, like put the hand up, that's enough. You got me, and actually went harder. And I thought, oh, geez, I'm in a bit of trouble here. And then he went harder, and next you know, that was it. I woke up in the change rooms.
You blacked out?
Yeah, I thought to myself, I'm gone.
Really?
Because I really started to lose, my breath and the whole lot. And I thought, geez, I'm gone here. And then
gone as in terms of you thought you might die?
Yeah, I might die. I seriously did at that moment, because I've never been in that situation. No one, I don't think too many people would have. And to lose your breath and go, you didn't know what to do. And then I thought, geez, I'm struggling. And next you know, gone, blacked out, and woke up in the change rooms
With
screaming,
the doctor?
to a screaming wife and an old man that I reckon wanted to, get out there and kill a few people himself because he was pretty upset.
Have you crossed paths with Danny Southern since that day?
Never.
What would you do if you did?
Oh, I'd just walk away.
Would you?
I wouldn't acknowledge him, no.
I want one more question on the Sumich incident. When you had him in the headlock, and he said to me that he tapped you on the arm or the shoulder as if to sort of say, "Okay, I'm done. You've got me." Why then did you maintain the hold on him for as long as you did?
I didn't feel that. Yeah, at that moment when I'm in the heat of battle, from what I remember, the extended event was there was actually a fair bit going on around us at the time.
Yeah.
And I know that Glenn Jakovich was definitely in the vicinity. There was a few other players, and I think at that stage there was a few guys trying to get hold of me. And so as I'm sort of getting grabbed and held, I didn't feel anything from Peter. You know, it was just, yeah.
Did you want to make a statement to the West Coast, seeing that they'd passed you over at the draft?
No, I didn't. No, I wanted to play good footy against them.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hurt anybody, but my dream was playing the AFL. I wanted to go to VFL. Let's say I grew up watching the winners. You know, it was not like today. My son's, you know, spoilt with his coverage of football he has. You know, when I was growing up, we had a 1 hour of the VFL every Sunday afternoon called the Winners. Used to love watching that, and my dream was to come to Melbourne and play in the city where it all happens. And I was lucky that I came over, and that's what I didn't really want to play for West Coast, to be honest with you. If the opportunity presented itself, that would have been magnificent. But I had a little bit of a hatred as a young fella for the West Coast.
Even though they'd looked after you after your knee.
Yeah. Even though I was in that environment, but what it did for me, Mike, it actually gave me the opportunity to play AFL footy. I was a little bit of a tearaway as a young fella.
In fact, in your own words, you ran a little bit amok.
Yeah, I did. I ran a lot of muck, if you want to extend it a little bit. Yeah, I was a little bit wayward and a little bit wild, and enjoyed life and my youth and hanging out with mates.
And booze?
I stopped drinking when I was 15, Mike. So
because it was getting you into trouble?
I was dodging trouble.
Yeah.
I was up to mischief, but I was dodging trouble.
What's mischief, Daniel?
Oh, just no good, Mike. You know, just being.
What, police stuff or?
No, never had any run-in with the police, Mike, ever in my life. So you know, just mischievous things that teenagers do. You know, so I think elaborate too much.
I think there's an extra.
My son might be watching this one, so I don't want to go into too much detail. But you know, I was up to no good as a young fella, and. You know, life could have gone down one or two paths. You know, I never say I was running with the wrong crowd because they were my mates, but we weren't doing the right thing all of the time. And just being in that professional environment and seeing how the West Coast Eagles at that time were a powerful unit. They were impressive, and just being exposed to that and seeing the professionalism and the work ethic and that these guys had, it made me realise at 15 that I had to give up that lifestyle. So I stopped drinking, haven't drunk since. Probably a handful of times I've had a beer since then, or an alcoholic drink, and just dedicated myself to living the dream. You know, I wanted to play in the footy, and I actually left school during that same period at 14 because I thought, you know, to be a doctor you have to go and study, to be a tradesman you have to go and do your time. I wanted to be a footballer, so I wanted to dedicate my life to footy and train.
So did you use that extra time that you had then to practice, hone your skills?
Yeah, I had a bag of footies. I used to go down to the Oval, little park, every day, most for hours on end, with a bag of footies and just practice, hone my skills. I used to ride 40 kilometres a day, used to do some weights, did everything I possibly could to make sure that I had an opportunity to get there.
You came from a broken home, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
How was your mum when you were, using that quote, running amok at 14 and 15?
Yeah, I was actually living with my father.
Oh, yeah?
So parents got divorced when I was about 10, I think it was. And so we were raised by my father, and he did a magnificent job. There was myself, I had a brother who's passed away since, and my sister. And we were given a lot of freedom, let's say. Like, our parents put a lot of trust in us as young children we were. So we fended for ourselves a little bit. Dad gave us a little bit of rope. We stretched that rope as far as we could, but you know, plenty of love, plenty of support.
Yeah, good.
He entrusted the values that he had instilled in us at a young age, that we're there to make the right decisions, and when we're confronted with different things that happen in life, and yeah, we made the right call most of the time.
Your mother was born in Africa?
Yeah, in Tanzania.
And you left Australia, I think, in early 2000s, did you not, to move to the Middle East?
Yeah, I left in, So mum during my footy days spent a few years living in Kenya. So I was lucky enough that during the off-season, most years I was fortunate enough to go travelling, and travelled with mum through Kenya on a number of occasions, and just had wonderful experience on safari there, and it opened up my world in many ways. And I've travelled extensively, Mike. I've been blessed. I've travelled to over 50 countries around the world, and I lived in the Middle East for 10 years, based in Cairo.
10 years in Cairo?
10 years in Cairo. That took about 30 years off my life. It's a crazy place.
I want to ask you about Cairo. everyone at the Bulldogs says, when I tell them I'm talking to you, say, he lived in this place where as soon as he opened the back door or lifted the blind, he could see the pyramids.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We own an apartment, and it's on the outskirts of Cairo, and yeah, the pyramids of Giza, about a kilometre away as the crow flies, but we've got an uninterrupted view of the pyramids from every room in the house. It's only a small apartment, but it's magical. You know, I look at them in awe every single day.
Yeah.
Every sunrise, every sunset, not up for too many sunrises, but when I was up, I'd go and just peer out at the pyramids and have a look in amazement. But the Egyptians take it for granted.
Do they?
Yeah, it's just a big pile of stones that have been out there for thousands of years, and yeah, not real great significance for a lot of the locals. Some of my wife's family haven't even been to the pyramids.
Really?
Yeah, which is quite amazing.
And she's local. She's
born and raised in Cairo.
Her name's Reham.
Reham. Yeah.
You've got 2 kids. Now, is she traditional Muslim?
Oh, she was born and raised a Muslim, mate. Yeah, so yeah, she's as Muslim as it comes.
And you converted for her?
No, not for her, Mike. No. It's sort of religion's something I don't really like to elaborate a lot on. Yeah, but I am a Muslim. I converted about 14 years ago. Religion has the power to unite, but it also has the power to divide.
Yep.
You know, so I don't like to elaborate too much about. But yes, I converted to Islam about 14 years ago.
Okay, last one on that.
Yep.
Ramadan was completed recently. Did you participate in Ramadan?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's a wonderful time of the year. You know, it's challenging mentally, but you know we fast because it helps you sympathise with those who aren't so fortunate. You don't have the accessibility to water and food, and you know it's a powerful time of the year for us as Muslims, and yeah, Ramadan's a great month.
So your 2 boys are being brought up Muslim?
Yes.
Yeah. They like footy?
Love it. Oh, Zachary, he's 7. He's obsessed, and to the point that we're worried because he just loves it. And you know, he gets up in the morning, and he's straight on YouTube, and he's looking at, you know, the good old days. You know, you want to know the history of AFL, VFL footy.
Like watching you or watching?
No, there's not much to watch of me, Mike. There's no vision of me. Thank God for that, because yeah, it would be quite embarrassing. But he just loves it. He's a Hawthorn supporter.
Is he?
Yeah. So
who's his favourite?
He would tell you Ty Vickery is his favourite.
Would he?
Yeah, he will.
You know what?
Yeah.
No disrespect to Ty, but I've never heard anyone say before that Ty Vickery was their favourite player.
Yeah, he loved him for whatever reason. But yeah, he loves Cyril. He loves Burgoyne. He loved Hodgie when he was there. He loves the old players. He loves Lee Matthews, and he
loves
always
Lee Matthews.
Yeah, he always asked me who's tougher. You know, am I tougher than Dermot Brereton? Was I tougher than Dipper? And when he comes to Lee Matthews, he says, "You weren't tougher than Lee Matthews."
At 7, he's saying that.
At 7, he snapped a goalpost. So there's no way in the world you're tougher than Lee.
What a he-man.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he follow the doggies?
Well, we were living overseas. He was born in Cairo. He was born in Egypt, and so we came to Australia when he was 2. And at that time, I didn't talk to him much about football, and we were living in Alice Springs, and Friday night footy predominantly was Hawthorn playing, and so they had a powerful era, and so everyone loves a winner, Mike. So he jumped on the Hawks bandwagon, and
but you didn't pressure him?
No, not at all, not at all, because he had no exposure to it, and I didn't talk to him about footy. And it was only a couple of years later when he started to understand a little bit more that I did play, and it wasn't until I went and had a run in the E.J. Whitton's game that it really sunk in that I actually played. And so he thinks that I've got him fooled, got him bluffed. He thinks that I'm a legend because I played in the E.J. Whitton's Legends game. Yeah.
How'd you play?
Oh, useless. Same as I always played, Mike. I never touched the footy.
That's not true. Don't put yourself down.
Never touched the footy. No, I got a couple of kicks. Had great fun. It was just terrific to get out there and run around and reminisce and mix it with the old boys. And it's a great event and obviously a great cause. So I loved it.
Take me back to when your first boy was born. Just the days leading up to that. You were in Cairo.
Yeah.
Was there civil war then, or was it an uprising?
Yeah, not quite civil war. The Arab Spring had taken place, and there was a revolution went down in Egypt, in Cairo. And so my wife was heavily pregnant. She was actually 2 weeks overdue. And the revolution took place. The city became quite lawless, and all the police removed themselves from the streets. There's about 30,000 prisoners were released. And where we're living near the pyramids there was a big prison just down the road. So when all the prisoners were on the run, they came through our area. And so it wasn't scary in a sense.
You sure?
It was...
Wasn't there gunfire out?
There was gunfire whizzing around left, right and centre around our place. And as I said, it became lawless. and the police had removed themselves from the situation. So the actual day that Zachary was born was the 2nd of February in 2011. It was called the Battle of the Camel, the day. It was quite a violent day in the streets of Cairo. But to move on the streets, every couple of hundred metres there was checkpoints set up. And so when you pulled up, and as a foreigner, it wasn't a good place to be at the time because the government had said that the foreigners had played a hand in the revolution and they were targeting foreigners. And I was working in tourism at the time, and so we evacuated all of the pretty much foreigners who had left Egypt. There wasn't too many of us left on the ground. And when we were driving on the streets, I mentioned these checkpoints. So when you pulled up to a checkpoint, it was armed by 10 or 20 men, with every sort of weapon you can imagine. So you'd stop at this checkpoint and they'd ask you a few questions, and you didn't know whether they were, locals, civilians looking after their own patch of turf, or they were the government's thugs who were out there to terrorise the people, or whether they were criminals who were set up. So sort of, you drive your few hundred metres, you'd stop again, they'd ask you questions. My Arabic was pretty butchered, it was pretty raw, but, we managed to get through, and the day he was born was, it was the best day of my life, and then it was one of the most... I don't really know how to describe it because, he was born and I was so joyful and so emotional, but outside there was helicopters flying around, there was gunfire, there was such uncertainty, and, we had to ride it out because, he wouldn't have a passport to travel.
Was he born at home or in a hospital?
No, in a hospital. We got to the hospital, which was about 1 kilometre away from Midam Tahrir or Tahrir Square where the revolution took place. And so... yeah, we knew we had to ride it out, and we had to have a convoy. After he came into the world, and a couple of days when we were leaving the hospital, we had to have a convoy of family come and make sure that we escorted me home safely. As a foreigner at that time, it wasn't the safest.
And so did the family come?
Yeah, they did. Not my family. Yeah,
No,
our Egyptian family, my wife's family. Yeah. So we got through the battle, and we rode it out for a couple of years post revolution. It was a traumatic time. It was volatile.
Sounds a bit like the Whitten Oval in the
late 90s. It was, yeah. Probably more rowdy.
I shouldn't trivialise that.
Probably more rowdy.
Daniel, have a look at this photo here. This is your last year as a player. You're obviously in civvies there and being carried off by your teammates. What was the occasion?
I retired mid-season.
Yeah.
And so must have been around 12 or 13. I think what happened, I was playing those first 7, 8 games of the season. I can't really recall how many it was.
Seven it was?
Seven
first 7 in a row.
And then when it had surgery on my knee, I tried to do the rehab to try and come back, and as we mentioned before, it was pretty sore. So that's when I decided to pull the pin, and the club thought they would honour me and give me a little bit of a send-off. So I actually ran out onto the ground with the players before the game, and they had a big caricature of me on the banner.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the game, the boys dragged me out there and chucked me up on their shoulders and got to say goodbye.
That must have made you feel good.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited there, aren't I? There's a lot of emotion. If you look at the photo, the lads are pretty happy.
Yeah.
So hopefully I had a little bit of an impact on those guys who I played footy with. And, we had fun. We went in and we sung the song for the last time as teammates. And, it was a great memory. Yeah,
even Nathan Brown's taken by the occasion.
Yeah, it took a lot. Brownie was pretty self-centred. It was all about Brownie. He was a great young fella. But, we're having a good time.
You're working for Clontarf at the moment. I want to know what the essence of your message is to the kids. They're predominantly disadvantaged kids, aren't they, that come into Clontarf, and football is the vehicle to try to get them to straighten up and concentrate on schooling and stuff?
So, we work with Indigenous young men.
Yeah.
So it's purely Indigenous boys who I work, or young men. So my message I pass, a lot of the young fellas are coming from a hard, tough place. And I walk with them in numbers on the streets daily, and I see the prejudice that takes place in society for these young fellas every day. And, our message to the young fellas is just get to school, try your best there, have a crack, finish school with an education, and then transition to full-time employment. So as a mentor for these young men, basically I try and just pass on my life experiences.
Yep.
I'm not an angel, I've made plenty of mistakes.
And you tell them all about what you're like as a teenager?
Yeah, definitely do, because a lot of guys are walking the same path. And you mentioned footy before. We don't run a professional football program, but it's so engaging for our young men. Most of them are so talented at it and have a natural love of the game. So we just let them go and play, and it is the vehicle. It helps attract them to school, and then we sort of let the teachers take care of the business in their classroom. We support them around them to make good life decisions, make sure they're taking care of themselves, so their well-being is hugely important, particularly the mental well-being. You know, so we're really positive with these young fellas and constantly pumping them up. And you know, if they do make a blue, which we all do, we don't whip them. We get them back on their bike and we get them moving forward and trying to get them to make better decisions when they're in that same position again.
Hey Daniel, there's 180 people have sat in that chair and most of them have told fascinating stories. None more than you.
Oh, thanks,
I've been
Mike.
engrossed. It's been brilliant talking to you and talking about lots of things that have been so pivotal to your life and that we know so much about on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's actually been good to air a few things, Mike,
Yeah,
so thanks
well
for
done.
that.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Daniel.
it.